All right. I'm going to get started and start with types of personal investments and just knowing assets is anything of monetary value. So it could be clothes, it could be money, it could be a car, it could be a house. All of those things are assets that you or your family own. Okay. What I want you to know about bonds is two things. One, that they're IOUs. All right. You don't own the company. You don't own any of the company. The company owes you money or the government owes you money. The second important thing is there's an inverse relationship between interest rates and value of old bonds. So if interest rates go down, value of old bonds go up. And obviously the opposite. So be careful tomorrow. Like they could do something where like money supply increases. If money supply increases, nominal interest rate goes down, value of bonds goes up. So just be wary of those type of questions with bonds. All right, the stocks, the big thing you really need to know is that stocks are ownership of the company. All right, there's part ownership of the company, and that dividends are a portion of the corporation's profits that are paid out. All right, that's really all you need to know. I mean, a capital gain is earned when a stockholder sells stock. That's good to know, but they would never ask you something on that. All right. So bonds are IOUs, stocks is ownership in the company. All right. Commodity money. They talk about it a lot. They use the term intrinsic value. And that just means if it's not used for money, it still has value. So you take gold, silver, and cigarettes, which are no longer used for money, but they're still valued by people. They have intrinsic value. That's commodity money. The second type of money is what they call fiat money. That's something that serves as money, but has no other uses. Okay, so think of paper money today. If we weren't using like a $5 bill as money, it'd be worthless. That's fiat money. Okay, you could commonly see a question either asking you about commodity or fiat money on a multiple choice part of a test. Okay, I'm just pausing in case people are jotting things down and giving them a second.
Mr. Bressler, I have a question.
Yeah, just a little louder, please.
Okay, so like I understand that like gold and silver have intrinsic value, but like why is that? Because what do they really do other than serve as like
Their rarity, like gold, is kind of rare or scarce. So that's the value, and you know that people think of it as important. And I think one time because you know it supported money at one time, think people have it in their mind that it's a valuable thing. We make it valuable. There's no like hidden value. So we just put a price to it. Okay, now the three functions of money. Again, a lot of times you'll see a question on one of these. Medium of exchange, that's the function of money you know the best. All right, that's going to the store. You give them money, they give you a good and service. All right, that is medium of exchange. All right, again, that's the one that I think we do each day. You go to McDonald's, you give them money, they give you food and service back for it. The second would be a unit of account. That would be me saying that jacket's worth $100. It puts a value on something. Tuition at Calvert Hall is $18,000. It puts a value on the tuition of the school. And then the third thing, a store of value. And a store of value is saving money for future, for the future. So if Carson's saving $10 a week for college, to spend at college, that's store of value. So medium of exchange, day-to-day, exchanging money for goods and services, unit of account, putting a value or a price on something, and then store of value, saving for future purchases. All right, all three functions of money. Credit cards are not money. I mean, they're short-term loans. So credit cards are not money. They're not M1, they're not M2, they're not part of the money supply. All right. So there's two types of, demands for money. There's transaction demand, and that's the money demanded for everyday purchases. That's money demanded for medium of exchange. And then there's asset demand, and that's cash money demanded to store. That's like money to save. All right. So those are the two kind of demands for money. What is the price paid for the use of money? That's interest. All right. Okay. Maybe I should leave that up a second. If you're following with the notes I did, I know I wrote those in, but some people might not be following along. So I'll leave it up here for a second or two in case you want to. And just remember the demand for money, which is downward sloping, and MS is perfectly inelastic. The demand for money is really like shifts based on, do you need more or less money in your pocket? And price levels is a big driver of that. All right, the Fed and monetary policy. So there's three shifters, and I'll think of it as rod. You have to know these three. All right. I'm going to say there'll probably be 5 or 6 questions based on knowing this shifting money supply. And I'll go through it in a second. Discount rate and open market operations, buying and selling. All right. I think later on, I'll go through each one of them, telling you how it increases or decreases the money supply. All right. So I think there'll be questions like that. One, be careful that you're in a recession. What monetary policy fixes a recession? And they go, lower taxes. Well, lower taxes does fix a recession, but that's fiscal policy. So if they're looking for monetary, you got to give them reserve requirement, discount rate, or buying and selling bonds, okay, which is open market operations. Think rod. All right, there's the money supply graph. The MS can only be shifted by the three things we just talked about. You lower the reserve requirement, you buy bonds, you lower the discount rate, you increase the money supply. You raise the reserve requirement, you raise the discount rate, and you sell bonds, and you decrease the money supply. The demand for money, again, I like to think, do you need more or less money in your pocket? And the thing you could think really in your mind is price level. Now, some of them are tricky. Like they give you 2 steps to get the price level up and then ask you what's going to happen to interest rates. Price level goes up, demand for money increases. Okay. Okay. Like, here's what I mean. Like if they said you bought bonds, you lowered the discount rate, you lowered the reserve requirement, all right, MS shifts 1, interest rates down, you need to be able to go increase the money supply, decrease interest rates, increase investment, increase aggregate demand. Increase aggregate demand, price levels up. Okay, I got to think about the demand shift of the money supply. And then I'm just going to go the other way. So I'll just say these, and I'm going to just keep saying them over and over again. Increase the reserve requirement, increase the discount rate, sell bonds, suck the money out. Interest rates up, increased interest rate, decreased investment, decrease aggregate demand. Okay, those are must for tomorrow. Okay, now They will never ask you this graph. I just think it just helps, even if you do these two, because then if I know reserve requirement increased, all right, reserve requirement increased. Sorry, I didn't know I was shifting right. So Fed buys bonds, buy, boom. All right, there goes my interest rates down. Interest rates down, investments up. Like I don't even have to think. I don't have to like try to remember. I just drag that line across, investments up. I know if investments up, AD shifts right, and there I am. Okay. All right, loanable funds market. Just really, I think like the big thing to know here, it's the supply and demand of loanable money. It matches borrowers and lenders. I mean, you could jot down the inverse relationship between real interest and quantity of loans demanded and direct relationship. I'll give you a second if you want to jot that down. All right. We'll look at the loanable funds graph. Question in the chat. Sorry. Which graphs use LRA? LRAS, AD, and SRAS, Dan, is just the regular long run aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply, aggregate demand. So, no special name. And Dan, if I could get this to do what it's supposed to do. The ADAS, there really should be an LRAS running through the start of the equilibrium. I just didn't put it there. I just try to simplify the graph, but that's the graph with real GDP and price level on the bottom. Thank you for asking. Okay, loanable funds. Here we are, loanable funds. Supply, savers, government deficit, government surplus. Now, if the government's running a surplus, what do we know? We then know they have more money than they had expenses. So therefore they could save, so supply shifts right. If their deficit is increasing, we know they're spending more than they have, supply could shift left. Now, a lot of times they'll say government is running a deficit and goes out to borrow. I tend to shift demand right. I think of demand as borrowing, business investment, and government spending. So supply, saving, both regular people and government, government surplus and government deficit, and then demand, I think of government spending and business investment. Now, anytime you see government surplus and government deficit, just think loanable funds could be coming up in that question. So get loanable funds geared up in your mind. All right, the money multiplier is 1 over the reserve requirement. I would say tomorrow, because you cannot use calculators, the money multipliers are going to be pretty, like, I would say 1 over 0.1, 1 over 0.2. I think they'll be pretty straightforward because they know you don't have a calculator. All right. All right. Here is
the shifters again
sorry, the shifters of what?
of the graph
Loanable
loanable
funds?
funds. Yes.
Yeah, I'll back
Thanks.
up. Sorry. So for supply, it's anything to do with savings, budget surplus, and budget deficit for the government. For demand, it's anything to do with borrowing, business investment, or government spending. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. That's what we're here for. All right. So the money multiplier is 1 over the reserve requirement. Now, anytime like they say, how much could the money supply increase in the whole system? How much does demand deposits increase in the whole system? Whenever they're asking for the increase in the whole system, think money multiplier. All right, think money multiplier. All right. And now, and actually, while I'm here, it's worth just, oh no, I have them at the end. Okay, I forgot I have them at the end. All right. All right. So if there's inflation, you would raise the reserve ratio. Why? Because banks have to hold on to more reserves. They create less money as they are not lending any, they're lending less out. So money supply decreases. So if you want to decrease the money supply, which increases interest rates, which decreases investment, which decreases aggregate demand, which you'd want to do in inflation, you could raise the reserve ratio. Obviously, you're going to do the opposite if there is a recession. If there's a recession, we're trying to shift AD to the right. So we're going to lower the reserve ratio. So banks hold less money. They loan much more out, and the money supply increases. Okay. This is the least used of them. The second is the discount rate. So if the Fed wants to fix a recession, they lower the discount rate. Okay. So they lower the discount rate, they increase the money supply, interest rates are down, investment up, AD right. To decrease the money supply, the Fed raises the discount rate. Okay. All right. Now the most used of all of them is open market operations. Here, buy boom. So if the Fed wants to shift AD, they want to increase the money supply, they buy government security, or which is the same as buying bonds.
So wait, like they're
Okay.
buying bonds from the population.
If they want to decrease the money supply, the Fed should sell bonds, also called government securities. They're the same thing. They decrease the money supply, interest rates go up, investment goes down, aggregate demand shifts left. Buy boom, sell sucks. So when they're selling, they're sucking the money out of the system. Okay. All right, the federal funds rate, that is the rate, the interest rate banks sell, that is the interest rate banks charge each other to borrow money. The way the Fed controls it is by buying or selling bonds to lower interest rates. So the federal funds rate, again, is the interest rate banks charge each other. And the way the Fed controls it is by buying and selling bonds. Dan, they're not exactly the same, but they go in the same direction. So if the discount rate's going down, the federal funds rate goes down. The discount rate, Dan, is more what the Fed charges banks. The federal funds rate is what banks charge each other. And usually in the federal funds rate, they might charge each other, a little less, like friends might do for each other. Okay. All right. All I'm going to say here is know the formula. Know that nominal equals real plus expected inflation. All right. which is nominal equals real plus expected inflation. And all you have to know is one, because they're all just, playing the math there. So I usually look nominal equals real. I think there's like 2 or 3 questions on that where you're gonna have to plug them in and think them out. All right, the Fisher effect, it's in the long run, and they say an increase in nominal interest will directly correlate with an increase in inflation. What do I mean? If nominal interest goes up 1%, then inflation goes up 1%. And the reason they say that is because real variables stay the same in the long run. Now, if you remember, nominal equals real plus inflation. So if real is going to stay the same, if nominal goes up 1, expected has to go up 1. Okay. The formula I like to use better is V times M equals P times Y. So V times M equals P times Y. V meaning the velocity of money, P the price level, Y the quantity, M the Y the quantity of output, M the quantity of money. Now, P times Y is nominal GDP. P times Y is nominal GDP, and Y is real GDP, because Y is output, and that's real GDP. Okay, there I had the equation that way. Okay. So I'm going to just go through these like $1,000 deposit. Okay. The change in immediate deposits would be $1,000 because you would get $1,000 in. You didn't have that deposit. So deposits would change immediately by 1,000. Okay. Change in money supply, immediate, no change. Why? Mr. Owens has $1,000 in his pocket. That's M1. He puts into his checking account. That's M1. It just changed places. Change in reserve requirement. 0.1, I'm going to take 10% of that 1,000. The change, immediate change, is 100. Change in immediate excess reserves, 1,000 minus 100. That gives me 900. And what could I loan out? 900. All right. Now, how about if they said maximum change for the system? Then I need to think of money multiplier, which is 1 over the reserve requirement. Okay, which is 1 over 0.1, which is 10. So immediate, so change in the demand deposits for the entire system is 1,000 times 10. And that's going to be 10,000, right? The change in the money supply for the entire system, I'm going to take my excess reserves and times that by 10. That's going to be 900 times 10. That's going to give me 9,000. Okay. Now, if I have 10,000 in the change in deposits for the system for 10,000, I need 10% of that for the whole system to be in required reserves. So 10% of 10,000 is 1,000. Okay. Change immediate both of these, 900 times 10 for 9,000. Now, for tomorrow, I think you need to know change in immediate money supply, which would be no change in the whole system, where you'd have to take out the 100 of the required reserves, and then have 900 times 10, and the money supply for the whole system would be 9,000. All right. Any question on this page before I turn to the next one? Okay.
Wait, so Mr. Bressler, can you hear me?
Somehow my sound isn't good. Could you just talk louder?
Yeah. So the change in immediate money supply would just be 900, but like over.
No, hold it. The change in the immediate money supply would be 0.
Oh, okay. So I was confused. But if you wait or you are talking about the whole system, that would be 9,000.
Correct.
Okay, so how is that going to be like phrased on a question?
It would say, Carson, it would say the maximum the money supply can increase throughout the system, or the maximum the money supply can increase.
Okay, I got it.
Okay. And Carson, when they were looking for the 0, they would say the change in initial money supply or the change in the money supply for that bank. Okay. All right. And I think that the next one is bonds. So I just want to go through kind of a similar. Okay. All right. So here the Fed sells a bond, $1,000 bond. Right. The immediate change is minus $1,000. In deposits, the immediate change is 0. I misread that. Sorry. Because there is no deposits with the Fed and bonds. So there is no change. The immediate change in the money supply is minus 1,000. Because now the Fed sucked out $1,000 worth. If there's no change in demand deposits, I know there's no change in reserve requirements. Okay. Now, is there the immediate change in excess reserves? I got to take 1,000 out of my excess reserves. And the bank could loan out 1,000 less. Okay. And by the way, these would be all the same. If the Fed buys, they would just be positive numbers. All right. Now, deposits throughout the system. Whenever it's a deposit, I take the amount, 1,000 times the multiplier is 10. So throughout the system, deposits would go up, would go down 10,000. Wait, so this is Fed's excess. Now this is the bank's excess reserves. And the Fed is selling bonds. They're selling it to the bank. No, okay. Walt, if the Fed is selling bonds, they're selling a bond to the bank and they're giving the bank $1,000. They're giving the Fed $1,000. So 1,000's leaving the system. Does that make sense to you, Walt?
So it's the Fed is selling the bond, right?
Yes,
And
I'm the Fed, you're the bank. I
Right.
sell you the bond. What are you giving me?
Money.
$1,000 that used to be in your excess reserves. That's now in the Fed.
Okay, got it. Thank
Okay.
you.
No, good. That's why we need to go over it. I would say there's 3 to 5 questions. Like the ones you really need, Carson, is if the Fed sells a bond, what's the immediate change in the money supply for the Fed would be 1,000, and the maximum would be 1,000 times 10, 10,000. So to remember with the Fed, you don't take out the reserve requirement. And if a deposit, you do take out the reserve requirement. All right. Any questions on anything? You could either chat them, put on your mic, whichever's easier for you.
So in this same scenario,
Yeah,
if it says that the Fed buys $1,000 bonds, would the change in immediate excess reserves become plus 1,000?
correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And then how much would money supply increase? Maximum.
It would have to be 10,000.
10,000. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. All right. Those you got to get because there's 3 to 5. And there's a couple on the practice test too that you should look at and take. Yeah, Kenny, just give me a second. Let me get my practice test. Yeah. Chat a number out, Kenny. All right, 10, 20, 24, 26. All right, let's go to 10. To decrease the money supply, the central bank could sell bonds. All right, because they suck money out. So therefore, MS shifts left. Does that make sense to you, Ken? Okay. The next one you have is 20. Okay. So what they're saying there, Kenny, is the opportunity. I think we did something like this in class today. The opportunity cost is the amount that you would make from interest. I'll get back to it in a second, Jordan. I didn't look, so I'll get back to it in a second. So number 20 is really the difference between the interest you would have made if you put the money in the bank and the interest compared to holding on to the money in your pocket. So that's kind of what 20 is saying. Jordan, you're saying 10C. Yes, Jordan, they're both 10C would be correct too. Yes, 10C would also be correct. All right, so now you have 24. If Congress pays a $5 tax on each ATM transaction, they will likely. Oh, so if Congress is taxing ATMs, you're going to use ATMs less, meaning you need more money in your pocket. So demand for money will shift right. Does that make? All right. Okay, so so you're good there. So that was 24, 26. If the equilibrium interest rate at the money market is 5%. Okay. All right. So if this is the equilibrium at 5%, and it's 2%, we're going to have a shortage, right? Because people are demanding this much money, but we're only supplying where the MS curve is. Kenny, does that make sense? Dan, I'm going to flip back and look at that. Dan, B was the other answer. Okay. Kenny, does that shortage make sense to you? All right, so now where did you go? You went 26, 60, 67, and 68. 26. Given an inflationary gap, the Fed will use monetary policy. All right, so an inflationary gap, we want to shift AD to the left. So we're going to decrease real GDP and decrease the price level, right? Because you're trying to get rid of inflation. Now I'll go to 67 and 68. According to the short run Phillips curve, when actual GDP is above the potential output, the price level increases and unemployment. All right, that's pretty much saying that according to the Phillips curve, when actual real GDP is above potential output, the price level increases and unemployment rate falls. So again, that would be like the I'm trying to think of the trade-off between unemployment and inflation, right? Price level increases and unemployment decreases. And that's what the Phillips curve is about. The trade-off between unemployment and price levels. And then 68, a supply shock. All right, so a supply shock shifts the SRAS to the left and the Phillips curve to the right. Right, because the shifter of the Phillips curve, Kenny, is opposite the SRAS. Charles, I'll answer you in a second. Does that make sense, Ken? Okay. If interest rates go, okay, Charles, if interest rates go up, the value of old bonds goes down. There's an inverse relationship between interest rates and the value of old bonds. $22, Jordan. Yep. Okay. If there's a rise in real GDP, AD is shifting to the right, Jordan. Price levels are going up. And if price levels go up, then you need more money. So the demand for money increases. Jordan, does that make sense to you?
I just didn't understand why A would like if the interest rate falls, then wouldn't that also increase investment and that could increase aggregate demand and that could increase money demand as well?
Here, I think though, here's what they're looking at. If you say interest rates fall, they're going to say quantity demanded shifts, right? You slide down and that immediate thing is quantity demanded changes, not demand.
Okay.
Okay. In the question from class today, they asked what happened to the demand for money after the creation of credit cards. There was a decrease in the demand for money because you didn't have to carry as much cash because you could use credit cards. Any other questions anyone has?
Mr. Bresser, for number 22 though, like also for the rise in real GDP, couldn't that technically be supply shifting, right? And then there would be a decrease in the price level?
No, because I think when we think of GDP increasing, we think of aggregate demand shifting, like for consumption, government spending, or investment. Not that supply can't do it, but generally when they say rise in GDP, they're thinking of AD. And Jordan, in your defense, I think the AP exam would do a better job and they would give you an AD shifter. I think they would tell you what would shift AD to get GDP to rise.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, you want to see that Keynes 3-step transmission thing. All right, let me see, could I get this thing to change? It seems stuck. There we go. There it is. Any other questions? Please feel free to ask. Walt, you good on this?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Anything else, guys? All right, I will see you tomorrow.